know that's happening now. Yeah, that's interesting. So no plans for March break then for Queens by the sounds of it.
I don't think so. If we do, it'll be very small, like maybe 1 or 2 small groups or cohorts, just with some people that have maybe with faculty and staff with kids to sort of get some staff hired and trained and on the ground to do some things, maybe from a leadership group that might sort of get hired to lead that. But right now we're just so protective around what's coming in the facility and haven't opened a lot of things up. So I don't think there's going to be a real appetite at that time to open up for youth. We're also hosting youth sports, women's national basketball championships right around that same time period.
It's complicated.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that could complicate it a little bit as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing, Gareth. Anyone else want to jump in?
So we opened probably a third of our camp last summer. We definitely had to change our structure and everything else. Normally our break is in February, so normally we run a February break. This year we're not, just due to SAS games are in our building, so we have no space, which is super fun. But the summer I think will be full on, is my understanding. There's not really concerns. Our biggest concern is that the university is, the policy is if you're not vaccinated, you can't be on campus. And so with vaccines opening up for 5 to 12-year-olds, I wonder how that will impact, because I know there is some hesitation from parents to get their kids vaccinated. So that's my biggest, I'm like, how's everybody handling that? What is everybody else gonna do?
Yeah, that's 100% on the forefront of my mind too, Allison. I was definitely hoping to chat with folks about that today. McMaster is the same. You have to be vaccinated to be on campus, and that policy wasn't in effect last summer. So we were able to operate and everything was fine, which also kind of is sets maybe a bit of a precedent that like, hey, we did it and it was okay. But yeah, now the policy is like everyone has to be, no exceptions now. So
yeah, so I also run our swimming lesson program, and so we definitely had a couple people drop out. But again, in the fall, the vaccine wasn't available for that demographic, so now it is. And so I think I'll have a prep with swimming lessons to see what happens, but I don't know how that'll impact camps this summer. But I know for the most part, our camp was 100% full last summer. So, but we took 60 kids versus 200. So
yeah,
and we cut out an age group and so yeah, but we were full on, we've been fully open since, so we haven't had the issues Ontario has and shutdowns and stuff like that as well. So
classes and everything are in person at Regina this semester too?
20%, and then in the winter they're saying 100%, but from what my understanding is about 80. So
okay. Anyone else want to talk about their program or vaccine woes? Yeah, Sarah?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So we did run camps last summer as well, just really our general multi-sport camp, no sport specific camps, nothing of that nature, and with the reduced capacity. But actually by the end, our target had been about a 50% capacity. And by the end of summer in our multi-sport, we were back up to close to typical numbers. So we were able, because other camps and the buildings were still pretty quiet, we were able to spread out and increase our numbers by the end of summer. As a reflection, parents were amazing, kids were amazing. They were so forthcoming with kids that were feeling unwell or questions, concerns. Like it was just really, we had a lot of concern leading into it, and it really ended up being an incredibly positive experience all in all over the summer, which was really great after so many months of everything feeling a little bit hopeless. So that was really great. Concerns about wanting to meet target timelines of the region. We are expecting other camps to go forward with opening registrations on a more typical timeline, but with questions about vaccination and uncertainty. I think, the university to date, when you ask for new event approvals or new program approvals from, our PRSG, I know everyone has some version of that on your campus. there's no urgency ever, and it's never, it's like, that's not till July. And even though you can share information and say, you know, to meet the industry standard, you know, we need to be opening registration in February or at the very latest by mid-March, and it just doesn't seem to connect to the university officials that this is like, they can't tell you in May that you can run camps in July. It's not going to work. So we have two things happening where we're planning for pretty much a full return to camps and planning a typical timeline, and then feeling anxiety about when we might actually be able to do things like open, and what kind of message do you put out there when it's like, yay, we want to run camps, but we don't really know if you're going to have to be vaccinated, and we don't really know. So, you know, I do believe we will be running camps at a relatively full capacity, but there's a lot of questions that I think need to be resolved before we can officially go public with any messaging or promotion.
Okay. Awesome.
And you asked about PD Day camp or March break camps. We kicked it around, but probably not. Like, it's not off the table completely yet, but it just doesn't feel like a high priority. So I doubt we will jump into any of those for this coming winter.
Gotcha. So we're planning on doing March break camps at McMaster. We don't have any plans for like PD days or May, June stuff. Our March break camp is pretty much always staff, faculty, children. And that was the direction that we were given from the university for the summer, last summer as well, where they were like, open it up for staff and faculty first to register. So that was like the primary group that we saw in the summer. But also, just to echo your statement, I found that there was just so much gratitude last summer. Like, it was one of the more smooth summers we've had in that sense, where like people were just so grateful to have a program, to be enjoying themselves, like out doing stuff. You know, there was obviously an elevated like anxiety level amongst parents and campers, but like overall people were so appreciative, and we were kind of the guinea pig for the recreation department. No one else had done anything yet, and so when everyone was like really hyper going into September, kind of freaking out, I was like, people are going to be really happy, like it's okay. And that sentiment seemed to be echoed, you know, with the students as well. So yeah, that was a nice piece at least. Okay, who else has stuff going on? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I can go next if you want.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie.
A lot of what you said, Lauren, resonates with me. We ran last year at a reduced capacity. Our normal summer would be about 1,000 kids. We ran like 6 weeks of virtual camp and 4 weeks of in-person, and got just under 200 in each. And yeah, really fortunately, COVID didn't rear its head at all, but COVID precautions made just everything hard. If you've ever tried to teach a lesson wearing a mask to kids wearing a mask who haven't seen other people in a year, like, it's not the easiest thing. And Ryerson was also like very locked down in terms of like every door was locked because we're super urban and no one was supposed to be on campus. So bathroom trips required like 20 minutes of planning. Yeah. So like the logistics of the summer were hard, but like the outcomes were all positive. We had our only symptomatic camper happened at like 2 p.m. on our last day of the summer. Like, really? But runny nose and nothing else. For the upcoming camp year, we're not going to do March break. I think at least partially because I'm planning to take parental leave starting in February for my then 9-month-old. So no one's going to do it. And for this summer, yeah, we're planning a pretty full return to whatever we're allowed to do. And the fact that we ran last year, I think will definitely pave the way for approvals where needed. We ran our multi-sport camp. We ran an architecture camp, no sport-specific stuff. But I don't expect too many hurdles that way. And yeah, Ryerson also has a strict vaccine mandate that you have to be vaccinated or have an approved medical exemption to be on campus. And I'm really thankful for that because it makes not having to plan around people who are unvaccinated makes the rest of the risk management a lot easier in my mind, where, yeah, like I mentioned, the hardest parts of our job were COVID precautions. And if we can say that, well, we don't need, I'm expecting that like the hard cohorts and distancing and masks for everyone all the time are going to be scaled back considerably by virtue of like 100% of people will be vaccinated unless they have a medical exemption. We don't need to go overboard with this. And so, yeah, we'll be moving much closer to a normal and hopefully full summer.
Nice. Yeah, it was interesting last summer. without like the university direction on the vaccine front, and our university can be very conservative, and HR can be very conservative with certain things. And even though we knew all of our staff were vaccinated, we weren't allowed to share that information. And parents were asking and wanted to know, and you basically was like, if you want to tell them yourselves that you are, you can share that with your group, but like, I'm not allowed to answer that question on your behalf. So at least, yeah, I agree with you, Matt, that now that there is a policy, it's just like, yeah, it's clear. It makes some of that kind of a little more easy to navigate, right? Yeah. So you mentioned that you didn't do any sport specific stuff last year, neither did we. Is there an intention to return to varsity camp programs this summer? Have coaches expressed an interest in that again? Yeah, I've seen a lot of nods.
Yeah, for us, we're still working through that.
Yeah.
But that's a varsity decision, and I expect that their budgets will demand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We ran our sport specific camp. I worked really closely with our coaches this past summer, probably closer than I've ever worked with them. And things went much smoother on all aspects. So I think we're going to keep that model, which is great for them and not so great for me. But yeah, everybody knows what coaches can be like. But it went much better than I thought it was going to go. So, but sport specific camps were huge for us last summer. The biggest thing was like, we just couldn't accommodate the wait lists of kids wanting to get into camps.
Yeah. Wait lists were tricky last summer too, because we found that like everyone registered for everything on the wait list. So it wasn't even like a true representation of what a wait list is, because they just put their name on every single possible thing. It was so hard to manage it. Yeah. So we've spoken a little bit about cohorting, right? And you, Matt, you had just kind of communicated that you think you maybe will move away from the intensity of last year. Like, what are other people's thoughts around cohorting?
I think it'll be dictated by our institution. I don't know if I'll have a say. I hope we can go back to normal, that we don't have to. I think if everybody's vaccinated, I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to. But yeah, I think our institution will tell us whether or not. Again, university's super cautious, so they have no issues telling me what I have to do with that. I'm lucky. I meet with all of our camp directors across campus every few months, and we have a meeting next week. So I'm sure we will have a bigger discussion about that and figure out what other areas are doing, and we usually get together as a camp group and make a recommendation so that we have some say in what we do. Not always, but at least give them some guidance on what we think and how we think it would work to do it in that manner. And that's helped us as well.
Okay. Interesting. Anyone else made any decisions or had discussions around cohorts? The one thing that has occurred to us is like, we didn't do any of the ancillary services last year. So there was no, before or after care, there was no bus transportation, no lunch program, there were none of those things. And and it was because of the cohorts, like we couldn't offer those additional services and still maintain cohorting. So if we do away with the cohorting, then we can bring those back, which are very helpful for parents, increase our registration, and then is also a huge revenue generation for us. So there's a lot of motivation to bring them back, but they're just not feasible if we have to maintain cohorting. No.
But in Ontario, like we were forced into cohorts by the Ministry of Health, right? Like that. As I'll say that for Ryerson, the program that I inherited existed in cohorts already, so it was like a convenient fit. But having watched that for a summer, I'm like running as far away from cohorts as I possibly can. But our hands are tied by the Ministry of Health. But I don't expect that they would say that, a camp of vaccinated children has to be cohorted. That doesn't seem reasonable. Mm-hmm. Because compared to the general population, the restrictions on camps was more lax than like other indoor activities, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. I know Matt and I had actually chatted a little bit about this the other day, but my concern around the like vaccine logistics is already pressing, where the university created their own app for us to upload our proof of vaccination, right? It wasn't linked to student cards. So you have to show your proof of vaccine and your government ID before entering the facility, which works when people are arriving at a staggered arrival. But when you have a couple hundred people all showing up at 8:30 and potentially on buses, bike, some with their parents, some not with their parents, we ask them not to bring their phones to camp. Just the logistics of how we would check them in if they have to show proof of vaccine, because I don't know that our university will allow us to collect proof during registration, even though the software in theory has the capability of doing that. Has anyone thought about that at all yet?
I'll say I hadn't given it a moment's thought until you brought it up, Lauren. Then I realized, wow, if there could be some bad decisions by university that just tank an entire like morning at camp. But it could be that like literally the first hour of programming has to integrate some degree of like roaming, like sign-in checks while we're like occupying kids in their pods until they're free to to integrate into the rest of camp, because they're still vaccinated on Wednesday, just like they were on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, which is funny because like I know a lot of gyms in our area just add it to your file. Like once you've shown it once, it's just on your file, and then when you come in, they don't check it again, right? Whereas like at our school, you have to show it every single time. So that's where I'm hoping we can have some influence and sway the university towards the former, but I'm not confident.
Lauren, a quick question. You were talking about the university not allowing you to collect that information, and is that just because you have that software where you can upload that information, so you're not allowed to keep the information? Or if you were able to actually see people's proof of vaccination, would that be fine with the university?
So they didn't want us to see the proof either.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't just about collecting the actual proof and personal identification stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yeah, they
Because
didn't want any eyes on anyone's medical information.
Right. Because for us, like the university has their own database where they, like as a student or faculty, or I think even guests as well now, you upload your proof of vaccination, but it's separate from, as you said, your student card or your ID as a member of the Western community. Mm-hmm. But because we're not allowed to collect that personal information, so there's a specific system for it. But I was wondering the same thing if you, I don't know if anybody else uses Fusion for programming, but for us, if there was a way to create a waiver so that when your counselors or whoever does the programming can check maybe the first week, certain people on the first day of camp, if these 100 kids have already shown proof of vaccination, you upload a waiver onto their account so that it shows that yes, they're fully vaccinated. Anytime they register for a different camp on a different week, we don't have to check them anymore. Anyway, just I don't know if Fusion is even capable of doing that. I know we can upload waivers for sure, but I don't know if the waiver can act as a either a barrier or a requirement that if you do have this waiver after you've already registered, it can limit whether you can register for other camps or not. But
so I think one of the, sorry to jump in.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
I think one of the limitations, at least in Ontario, is that the legislation for recreation facilities requires that vaccines are checked upon entry every time. Which when I learned about that, and like we have a swim group that comes in every week and they're not going to get unvaccinated midway through the semester, my jaw dropped that, like, yeah, we've got to check every single time. And so unless that legislation changes, then I think camps are kind of stuck, and that might be an area that the Ontario Camps Association needs to do some lobbying, because yeah, that's going to be an absolute fustercluck.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like I can't even keep up with government regulations and what they're planning to do in the new year too. But I think one of the things they had talked about was that perhaps come March, there were no more showing proof of vaccination at all. So if that's a thing, then we can just go back to normal, and it'll just really depend on what the university, each institution wants to have as their own protocol, right? But anyway.
I know for us at York, we had to submit a proposal last year, and we're going to probably do the same thing this year, and we just have to wait, right? I hope the legislation doesn't come out, or the guidelines don't come out like they did last year in June, because that was really tricky for us. So last summer, we submitted a proposal to run camps based, like we had to wait for the guidelines to come out. So as soon as they came out, then the university was like, okay, you can actually go ahead and run them. So no big deal, plan camps in 4 weeks. So we just decided to do like a very, very small cohort of kids. And like, Sarah said, it was very successful, very well received. The parents were great, the kids were great. Honestly, for me, I mean, I've been doing camps forever, but it was one of the most rewarding summers, even though there was a very small amount of kids, because it was just so nice to see them engaging with other kids again and just getting back into it, right? But I know for us, it's going to be the same thing. We will submit a proposal and then we just have to wait till the university says yay or nay on sort of what we can do. But I mean, we are planning on going ahead with our regular programming for March and for summer. So fingers crossed for all of us.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on vaccine stuff? That's a good point about the Ontario Camps Association. I will bring that back to them as well, because I am a member and on a couple committees there. So yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe we can get their support, because that really is how we kind of ended up with some more lax guidelines to operate last summer. So I'll bring that back. Thanks, Bunny. Any other comments? No.
I mean, as long as our premier can just offhandedly announce in the middle of like a Saturday morning news thing, like, oh, it'll happen, then like it'll be fine. Everything will work. Allison, that happened. That was the inside joke.
Yeah. How are folks feeling about staff hiring this year? It's like we always had a huge natural succession plan with our staff, right? There was always this great body of people to choose from. We didn't have to do a whole lot of like external job posting, and that is gone are those days. How are other folks feeling and handling their staff hiring and staff training? Like, have you come up with any concepts or philosophies around what staff training is going to look like this year? Because I know we'll be easily probably 70% new staff easily.
So that was me last summer. It was awful. But I got rid of some people. Well, I didn't get rid of people, but like people who had some bad habits, they were gone. It was great. We kept our staff training very similar, but we did a lot more. Like, I think we had 3. Normally I have 50%, and I think I had like 10% return. And so what we did is we actually created like little groups, working groups so like we would go through something and then we put them into their working groups with that returning staff, so that they could, normally we would partner them because we would have enough returning staff to partner them and work with them for part. That we did almost like in staff training through these little groups where they literally worked together, went through like, what does the day look like? How are we going to teach this? How do we break this down? So that they kind of did it before camp started a little bit, just because that was me. I was like, how's this going to work? They're all brand new. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows how to get to like, and I also run a program for newcomers to Canada. So normally in that group I have a couple who've been in that program. There's language barriers. These people have to have been in Canada less than a year. So there's a lot of, and it's a federal program. So there's a lot of other things that go along with that. And so to have everybody brand new except the coordinator in that program made it really stressful. So we actually brought an old instructor back to meet with that group as well, to talk about expectations and behaviors and those kinds of things, and how to manage kids that don't come from Canada, who have very different behavioral issues or things that you may not think is triggering, like bouncing basketballs, but it can be for some kids. So having those old campers or old instructors come back and have a couple of those conversations was actually really helpful for us too.
Yeah, I'll say that for us, one of the big value propositions for running camp last year, because it wasn't profitable, was not choking off our pipeline of talent, especially because I started in February of 2020. And so if we didn't run camp last year, it would be 100% turnover and like 100% loss of institutional knowledge on how to run the program. So hopefully we have returners this year. It's a big finger crossed, but I will definitely be badgering our LITs from last year. Some of them are great. Some of them were teenagers. But just to retain as much institutional knowledge as possible, even if it's really from the ground up, will be a priority for me.
That's where I have Matt right now. no coordinator since before 2020, and then 2 summers of completely dormant camp and youth programs. And most of our staff that were back with us in 2019 have graduated and moved on. And so that loss of institutional knowledge just feels very real to me. The other thing that I'm really worried about is 2 things. The timing of when we'll actually know what we're allowed to do and when we're allowed to do it, and what the recruitment cycle is for those positions. And then 2, I'm a little worried about our departmental response right now to the minimum wage thing, and where all of our camp staff are going to kind of be situated in that. So I've made a couple proposals that so far haven't really moved forward, but obviously in Ontario, just for Allison's sake, I think everyone else is in Ontario, but obviously we're going up to $15 an hour, and our immediate response for the department is, well, we're just going to compress all of the wage grid. So someone that was like $1.75 more in wages is just going to now be like 75 cents more, or that sort of thing, right? So
Yeah.
that's going to create a lot of challenges and incentives, I think, especially when we see in the area, like Tim Hortons in Kingston is hiring casual staff for $21 an hour. So we're like, what are we doing hiring like our main camp leadership at $15 an hour, and we don't have a good mitigation strategy to deal with that wage pressure as well. So I'm worried about the timing, the loss of institutional knowledge, and what the wage implications could be for getting good talented staff. So yeah, I'm a little worried about the camp hiring cycle right now. The training, if we get them, I'm not too worried about the training. I think we can do that piece. It's the recruitment piece that I'm really concerned with. So what's the time period that people typically are hiring their camp staff? Like normally at Queen's, for example, we usually the 3rd week of January is when we get our postings all out there and ready to go. And certainly our leadership roles, we really like to try to have in place before the February reading week, because a lot of folks go back to their hometowns or do something over reading week, and it's really nice if they know what they're doing for the summer by that time. So that's always our target or our goal. I do find that most of the general staff slip into like first week of March before they're really hired and in place for summer roles, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to get on that time frame this year. So
so we're early at McMaster. We hire our directors and our leadership team in December. We try to hit the exam timeline to get all of those interviews and applications in. And then I'll open the counselor posting in December, just so it's up. And when students are at home, if they're looking, it's there. But that'll be open for a couple months. We'll usually close that at the end of January. And then we try to get our main kind of bulk of those counselors hired in February, so that we have some of them ready to go for March break camp. So that if they're new, and especially because with March break camp, like none of the students are on break, they're still in classes. So it's a bit of a puzzle to piece that staffing plan together. So that way we actually, carry more than we need, but because they're always coming and going. And so it works as a little bit of a training opportunity too, where if you're new, it's here, come get your feet wet at March break. And then, you'll be more ready in the summer. So we're probably on the earlier side, but we've started. One thing for you, I'm sure you probably already do, Gareth, but with the concurrent ed program, you have a nice pool of applicants. That's something that I wish we had at McMaster, because we don't have that to source. I sent our job postings to Brock because they have a Hamilton campus, and didn't hear anything back or have any phone calls returned. So I don't know if they were shared, but that concurrent ed program is a sweet spot for you, I bet. Absolutely. That's our core draw here. It's brilliant having that for sure. And we've got a very strong student-led club model across Queens, both in our athletics and rec, but also through all the student government. And I've been in touch with the Concurrent Ed Student Association president as well about kind of hosting a Q&A sort of session, just myself, and I'm trying to set that up in December as well, just to get the awareness out there, so that we can at least get some hooks out and see what we can find. So yeah, but definitely we're fortunate with that group. I'm finding more and more that folks are finding much better paying opportunities as well. So
I could share one strategy that you reminded me worked quite well last summer, and where I found most of my best staff was in my role, I supervised both camps and aquatics, and separate from camps, I had reached out to programs that do that require their students do a clinical placement or a practicum, because I wanted to market first aid courses to them. And an offshoot of that was connecting with our child and youth studies program, saying, hey, do you want CPR courses? And that got me looped into their practicum coordinator, who came back to me asking, hey, do you need practicum students? And we ended up hosting, I think, 4 practicum students in like a camp counselor / camp leader role. And they were fantastic. That was aligned with their, like they were required to complete a practicum somewhere, and it was aligned with what they were doing in their education and life. And so that's definitely an avenue I'll pursue again. And that was like complete happenstance. But I'd certainly recommend checking out like what programs are in your campus and do any require their students to do practicums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we utilize the occupational therapy program, but they don't act as counselors. They act as occupational therapists, which is like an amazing resource to have. But yeah, we don't have any like youth specific stuff. Yeah.
I just had something else to add. Not sure if anybody else is on the same boat, but we've had a bit of a slowdown with actually being able to post jobs. Obviously with camps, we don't have anything running right now. We're pretty much in the same place as Gareth at Queens with trying to find a new coordinator, and obviously having no one returning since we didn't have camps for the last 2 years as well. So we're looking to also not do March break and our Wild Western days, which was the May and June. So we'll start just summer camps, July, August. But just with other departments that we have here at the rec center, we're at very low capacity. And mostly because HR hasn't allowed us to really hire our usual numbers. So one of the things we're probably going to struggle with is, on top of the minimum wage and all that, is if we can't hire them or offer them a job on time, say even before March break, then I'm kind of scared that we're going to lose a lot of them to, like I think it was Gareth who said that casual employment at Tim's for $21 when they don't have anything secure. And with other years, it's been a little bit better because at least they know they'll have a job for June and a job for July and August, whereas now it'll only be the 2 months. So it might be a little bit harder to try to entice our students to stay and be part of the program, right? Especially if we're not offering a decent wage compared to Tim's and all that stuff. So I don't know if anybody else is on the same boat and how they're dealing with that.
Yeah. Has anyone come across any like grant opportunities for employment? We were able to utilize the Canada Summer Jobs Grant last year, and that was a huge help. So I think we'll explore that route again, but I know there's been some things in the news I haven't followed too closely, but some things great about trying to get our labor, force back and employed. Has anyone come across anything on that side? No, not yet. Okay, please share with the group if you do. I'll pass along anything. Aside from like the like Wild Western days, right? Like the May and June programs. Does anyone do anything or have any partnerships for May and June employment for your camp counselors? Because that's always a huge barrier too for university students, is that they're only employed for half of the summer. So we have like a small partnership with a pool installation company that we send some people to, but that's really the only thing we've ever done. Has anyone have any unique partnerships? No. Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying
Can I just, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We partnered with Tennis Canada last year and had some of their staff that worked with us. It wasn't May and June, but this year we're going to try to get some stuff going a little bit earlier. They're right beside us on campus, so it was really nice to be able to sort of utilize having their services and being able to offer some lessons outdoors. The parents really like that, kids really like that. But we are looking into it. I think it's a very good point. I mean, trying to get a partnership a little bit earlier on to get these staff in the door and sort of keep them around is, because it's tough, right? When you, I mean, my staff were in touch with me. We're very fortunate here that the staff really, love, I guess, the whole camp program. They work a lot in the fitness center and just in the facility in general, but to have them reach out to me and me say, you know, it's constantly, I'm not sure, I'll keep you posted. It's tough, right? When you really want to be able to offer them positions and get them locked in like you normally can, and the timelines, like we just can't until we get some more direction. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but I'm hoping if we can sort of put the bug in the university's ear, like this is our plan, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to partner, who we would like to partner with. I'm hoping that things might get rolling a little bit earlier this year. We can sort of get some of our staff back and get them on their contracts.
I just had a question in regards to wages. Are you guys all unionized, your staff all within a union?
No.
No? Okay. So how do you set your rates then? Like are your staff unionized? Because it sounds like the university's setting your rates.
Like my coordinators are in a union. Our casual staff are not. During the academic year, that puts some provisions on how many hours a week on average a casual staff member can work, which handcuffs a little bit, but no one's really looking at us right now. So with dealing with like lower staffing, we're just breaking the rules a lot. And no one's complaining about it. So we're just carrying on. But yeah, as far as like how the wages get set, we have the provincial minimum wage, and then the department they made a really, really simple compensation grid a few years ago. I think it's too simple because it doesn't allow like enough progression and growth of some leadership capacities within our student teams. So I'm trying to not only change the wage grid, but the student model a little bit right now. It's just really, those are hard things to propose and do when we've had like terrible revenue and no revenue in many cases over the past few years, right? So, or past couple of years. So, but yeah, nothing from a union perspective really governs our wages per se, other than like we just have to be really cognizant of our full-time unionized group and what kind of the base rate is. During the May through August period, we've got a lot more flexibility though as well. So
okay, yeah. So we don't, ours aren't in a union, but we follow the union payout for students, and we have the opposite. Like last year, my camp corner went from like $20 an hour to 23. And then all of our lowest paid instructor was supposed to be starting at like $19 an hour. And I was like, camp's done. Like I can't pay that. And so I actually worked with the group of people who run camps on campus, and we all kind of went like, what are we paying our staffs? And we said like, this is the set rate. This is what we want to pay them. And we keep it pretty consistent. So like every year you come back, you get I think it's a 50-cent raise. But because our camp counselors are doing the same thing across the board on campus, that's how we've gotten HR to buy into ours, because we can't follow the union rates because they're like insanely, because most of our student staff are in a union. Camps and intramurals aren't, and I want to keep it that way. So that's how we manage it, because ours is the exact opposite. Like they're almost making more money than our caretakers and our full-time employees. So we had to figure out, that was our argument to not follow it, because I can't pay them that much.
There was a push to unionize this past year at McMaster, and they were able to produce a clause. So if you're a student, it doesn't apply to you. But if you're not a student, which most of our like leadership team folks are not McMaster students anymore, they're like teachers college, graduate kind of age range for the most part. That's where they get hit. And so we're able to do the temporary casual this year. Maybe get a slap on the wrist and ask for forgiveness, like Gareth. But that's kind of, the direction we were heading, because they set timelines. So it's like, a 6-month contract under 12-month contract. And then if it's like anything over that, then they're like automatically in the union. And if they return, so that's where like, I think we'll be fine this year, but we might get screwed over next year, because it's if they return to a contract that they get bumped in, which is like not in their best interest. So like they don't want to be a part of it. So I don't know. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? We've got 10 or so minutes left. So is there anything else that people wanted to talk about we used this kind of season as a good opportunity to reevaluate what programs we were offering, and decide, what is coming back and what isn't, because it seems silly to like bring a program back maybe for another year to then cut it, potentially next year. So anything that was like on the chopping block has gotten cut. And what I found with our varsity programs, I don't know if anyone else is finding this, is there's like a move towards a clinic model as opposed to a camp model. And like part of it too is they have to share space. And so, it's like men's basketball gets 2 weeks, women's basketball gets 2 weeks. And so it's not like a super effective means of staffing, right? It's the same thing. It's hard, like how do they employ their staff? And also, like if you're only running 2 weeks, then how many campers are you really able to reach? So a lot of them are looking at the clinic model. Has anyone found that at their school? Yeah, a little bit.
It definitely resonates. I'm just not sufficiently closely tied into varsity to know, to my finger on the pulse there. They're also just focused on winning games right now and don't want to talk to anyone about anything.
Yeah.
But in the early days of planning for last summer, that was a consideration of, if we can't do varsity camps, would we do varsity clinics? But that amounted to nothing, but I can see the allure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our football team switched their camps to last summer. And it worked really well. And they probably had more kids go through than ever in the past. So I don't know if it would work for, like, our basketball has such a following that I don't know if it would work for them. But I could see with some of our other sports, them looking at model to reevaluate.
Mm-hmm.
Our women's volleyball team are doing a clinic this weekend. So our coach is always very eager to do a lot of clinics, and they're very successful. She's got 30, I think, participants, and it's sold out. And it's definitely something that, you can look at doing sort of, I guess, throughout the year too. And it's not, if it's just the one day, right? I think it's a 2 or 3 hour sort of program, and she has a lot of it is in person, and then there's some portion of it that's virtual. So those have seemed to be pretty successful. That we sort of do. And I know, like you guys were saying too, the clinics in the summer are super popular, because then, especially for the older kids, and they're not there all day, right? You 18 to you 15, and they're not there all day, and they're just, it's a half day thing, and they, go home, and they get their skills and go on sort of with the rest of their day.
Yeah, similarly, our volleyball programs they do both. They do some camps, but then they do clinics primarily on like Fridays too, because they found that like no one was ever at camp on Fridays anyway. So yeah, they moved to that model. So that's interesting. Football a couple years ago, they just do like a 1-dayer in the spring. But again, yeah, it's like 300 kids that come roll through it for different positions, which is way better numbers than they ever got at a camp. Are people still doing like tackle football camps? Because that was something too that I know we've talked about a few times, is like the movement maybe to like flag or touch football with the youth as opposed to tackle, because our numbers were just like lower and lower and lower every year. And it wasn't because the team was bad, like these were Vanya years, but there's just, I think, more like concern and awareness with parents around youth football. Is anyone else doing anything with the
Yeah,
football
so
team?
that's what the football team does, is tackle. Last year they didn't because of COVID. They did no contact, but their plan is to move into that again this year.
Yeah, I think our football program's looking at how they might work with the local football folks and facilitate a flag league of some sort for youth, but it's tricky because we have a relationship with our minor football community group, but their idea really steps on the toes and competes with some of that. So it's a tricky balance there. But they do still, as far as I've last heard, they still want to run like a full tackle week and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
we'll see.
For those of you who have football clinics or camps that are tackle, what's the youngest age group that you have tackle for?
Sorry, I have to look it up. I don't remember. I want to say it was 13, but I'll double check.
Same.
I'm only asking because I'm a rugby player myself, and I know there's a program called Rugby, which encourages all the rugby rules and part of the game without the tackle portion of it. And I know it's been quite a successful program. It's run by Rugby Canada, but they offer programs for like teaching athletes, like rugby athletes, on how to run those programs in the community. And I think most of you have a varsity rugby program, whether it's women's only, men's only, or both. So it's something that I've been thinking about maybe integrating this year for our camps in the summer, to have the varsity rugby teams maybe do that part of it, which I believe tackle is introduced after 16 years old or 16-year-old. So anything below that would go under rookie rugby, which you kind of get that, you know, not necessarily comparable to football. I know that, right? But something different for kids to try. And then when they're actually doing tackle, then maybe have that offering for football with full contact. But just as a different option as well, though.
Yeah, we don't do anything with our rugby team, but there's a few coaches who I'll be meeting with to see if now is when they want to start a program. Our rugby coaches aren't full-time coaches, so that's also a big factor, is like the camp programs that we run are facilitated by coaches that are here, that, you know, are full-time on staff, which is just basketball, volleyball, and football. Everyone else is a part-time coach in our department. So
We have tried rugby camp, but because the rugby SASC operate in the Regina Rugby Union, run rookie rugby, we try not to step on their toes because we work with them with our rugby teams. And so we try not to do that, but I know that they've had the same really success with that program. So our coach actually is one of the lead instructors for it. So, but our coach is volunteer. They're not a paid position at this point. So they're not part of any youth sport teams or anything. So but yeah, it is a great program. I've seen it in action. They usually come and do some training with our staff as well.
And to
Sorry,
answer your
also just a quick follow-up question. When you guys were talking about clinics, whether it was like a day clinic or even during the summer, do you guys have, I guess I guess you answered that question. You have your coaches running those clinics, right? Yeah. Do you also have part of the student athletes run those programs as well as counselors? Yeah. I had a different question too, but I forget now.
Yeah, all of our varsity sport specific is all facilitated by the teams. So I mean, I hire them, but I don't really hire them. Like, they're voluntold that they're doing it for the summer. So we've tried to legitimize it, you know, with a little bit of an interview process and application process and staff training, but yeah, it's not like they don't get the job really.
And so do you have them in with your whole camp counselor group to have that training, or do you have a separate training for them?
I do separate training for them.
Okay, right. I do remember my other question actually. Do you guys have, if it's a football clinic, for example, is it just an overall football clinic, or do you have enough demand that you can actually split it into a quarterback's clinic and an offensive line clinic and receivers clinic? Yeah, that's the case.
Yeah, so our football, they do a pass and cover clinic.
Right.
They do a lineman clinic and a kicking clinic.
And ours has them like linebackers, quarterbacks. They have like 6 separate clinics for the different positions. So they'll have some kids come to every single one. And then they have some kids who like are focused on one skill set, and that's where they go.
Volleyball has done, they do both. So they do some that are just like technical skill clinics, but then they also do position specific clinics too. And they do theirs by age in our volleyball program. So it's not just like a free for all, anyone can come. It's very targeted age groups per session. Does anyone else have any other questions? Any brain you want to pick? Anything on your minds?
I was just going to make a suggestion that everyone's kind of, I think these roundtables are great just to even get in the headspace again. But with camps coming quickly, I'm wondering if there might be interest in doing almost like and I'm being selfish because I've got a new person that's coming on board in January, but like a chance for them to, you know, touch base and network with this community, maybe even once a month as we go through the winter term and in lead up. I think it could be helpful to have this group sort of come together and chat about what's going on, what changes, what challenges, and touch base. But anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, I had the same discussion yesterday with sport clubs. Like if anybody wants to, I'm part of the Canadian leadership team through NIRSA too. So we can always set it up, or if the group just wants to create I know we have a camps contact list that I can send out to. If we're like, hey, we're going to do one this time, I can just email anybody who's in camps that have kind of filled out that part to just invite more people too, for sure.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. But I know time's precious as well. So.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Who here is a part of the Ontario Camps Association? Queens, Ryerson, Trent.
I am as an individual. Our camp program is not affiliated with OCA right now, but
Okay.
I'm an individual in the association, which doesn't do a whole lot as an individual other than voting for their people I don't know. So, I mean, obviously there's a few resource documents and stuff, but I find you can usually find that without being a member as well. But we're taking a look at that as something that we want to consider down the line. So.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. It's nice, yeah, to see faces and chat industry a little bit. Like you said, get back into the brainwaves of actually having to do this again, right? So yeah, I'm totally open to meeting again on a more frequent basis. So if people are interested, then let's make that happen. That would be awesome. Keep us all posted. And if you come across any neat opportunities, you know, unique job offerings to pair with camp counselors, grant opportunities, please share to the group as well. That would be wonderful. Awesome. Okay. Well, have a great day, everyone. And good luck with the next stage of camps planning. Fingers crossed for all of you. Wishing you luck.
Thanks for
hosting, Lauren.
facilitating. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
no problem. Have a great day.
Bye.